Poor unfortunate souls in pain, in need. This one wanting to be thinner, this one wants to get the girl. And do I help them? Yes, indeed. Get in, Cosmic Cuties. This week, we're talking about Chiron wounds. Hey Cosmic Cuties, it is your friendo, the Lady Ms. Vagina Jenkins, and yeah, this week we are talking about the asteroid Chiron, what it means, and how it can show up in our lives. This video is partially inspired by a recent astrology reading that I gave, where I was talking to the client and we were talking about all kinds of things related to purpose, career, money-making, material resources, and they happen to have a Chiron in the second house, which speaks to wounding around those issues. So our conversation was amazing and incredibly deep and fraught, because we needed to touch on the issue of Chiron to explore their relationship and their values around material resources and money. So shout out to that client. You know who you are. Thank you for inspiring this video. I always like to give credit where credit is due. So thank you. So about Chiron, it is an asteroid or a dwarf planet that some astrologers work with, some astrologers do not. By the way, there are hundreds of asteroids, comets, fixed stars that we can use in our astrological practice. I don't mess with most of them, just as a personal preference as an astrologer. I think that there's so much information that we can get from the planets that we already have in our tool chest. But I do want to mention that there are these hundreds of thousands of asteroids, fixed stars, comets out there that can be used in your astrological practice. So if that is something you are interested in, you could do some deep dive research into it. But yeah, Chiron, just like any other planetary placement or luminary, asteroid, fixed star, etc., can have an effect on our lives. And I like to work with Chiron, even though I don't mess with most of the other asteroids and fixed stars and comets and things, because I think that it is particularly useful in terms of understanding the ways in which we might be sensitive to a particular issue, or maybe even experiencing active trauma around a particular issue. Chiron's full orbit takes about 50 years, so usually around the age of 50, people will experience a Chiron return. It is one of a number of planetary returns that I think of as making up the sort of midlife crisis that we've heard so much about. Chiron was discovered in 1977, and so I want to offer up, the same way that I did when we talked about Pluto, the fact that for centuries we have had astrologers from cultures all over the world looking at the sky, and we have centuries of evidence about most of the planetary placements in our chart and luminary bodies. But with Chiron just being discovered in 1977, we only have less than 50 years, 48 years to be exact, of study around what Chiron means and what patterns may show up in terms of Chiron transits and the ways it affects our lives. And I want to offer that up because if anyone tells you that they are a Pluto expert or a Chiron expert, please take that with a grain of salt. because these are relatively new bodies that we have discovered recently. I think Pluto in 1939, 38, I can't remember. And then Chiron in 1977. We don't have a full cycle of data to interpret about either one of those planetary placements, but we have some really good hypotheses. And I'll share a couple of the more interesting hypotheses that I've seen. One thing is about planetary dignity. Where does Chiron find its home, and where does it find its exaltation? And then, knowing those placements, where does it find its debilitation and its exile? One theory that resonates with me, but I'm still thinking about, that Chiron may find its home in Sagittarius, partially because of the mythology surrounding Chiron. Chiron was supposed to have been a centaur medicine man or healer who was wounded and could not heal himself. That's why Chiron is known as the wounded healer. One of my favorite astrologers on TikTok and also here on YouTube is theastrodim, and they have an amazing description of the Chiron mythology. I'm going to see if I can find it. If I can find it, I will link it in the caption below. It's really, really good. But yeah, Chiron as a centaur being associated with Sagittarius, that feels like domicile sort of behavior, right? In terms of Chiron's exaltation, some people have theorized that Chiron could be exalted in the sign of Virgo. Because so much of Chiron is about healing, education, or taking in information and applying it to improve one's self and one's journey through life, and really integrating this kind of feeling of healing. Folks say that it aligns with Virgo's practicality, its desire to be of service, its desire to improve physical circumstances. So at home in Sagittarius would mean in its detriment in Sagittarius's opposite sign of Gemini, which tells me about the dangers of overthinking and constantly taking in information but not integrating it as far as like healing the Chiron wound. And if it's exalted in Virgo, then that tells me about its fall in the sign opposite of Virgo, which is Pisces, which tells me a lot about the importance of boundary work to healing one's Chiron wound. Now, these are just theories, but I do like these theories. They resonate with me because it tells me about the qualities of Chiron beyond just feeling wounded. So that's everything that I wanted to offer up in terms of what is Chiron about. And then I want us to find it in each of our charts to understand what Chiron can mean specifically for us. So I want to talk about how Chiron might express itself in each of the 12 houses. But before I get there, I want to also offer up that finding your Chiron placement in the houses to understand what area of life this wounding may have happened and may continue to feel tender. That's part of the picture. Also, are there any other planetary placements making aspects to your Chiron placement? Are there any planetary placements that are sitting right next to your Chiron placement, combining their energies and talking about how this woundedness might affect that particular planetary placement? For example, a Chiron sitting right next to Venus. Does the wounding have something to do with your values or the way that you manifest the desires of your heart, or the ways that you find yourself in romantic connection with other people, or not finding yourself in romantic connection to other people? Knowing the degree of your Chiron placement will also help you to understand any other aspects that may be happening in the rest of the circle of your natal chart. So maybe there are not planetary placements directly next to your Chiron, but maybe there are other planetary placements at the same degree as your Chiron. Are they making a trine or sextile, generally sort of supporting your Chiron healing in some kind of way? Or are they making squares and oppositions that might create more tension with your Chiron placement? And then the last little bit is, yes, we find it in a particular house, but then also Chiron by the sign might show you a little bit more about how this wounding shows up in your life. So yeah, find your Chiron placement, find out what house it's in, and to get the full picture of your Chiron placement. I will also offer up that one of these theories that people have put out there that I do not resonate with is that the Chiron wound, or the initial Chiron wound, may have happened at the age that is equivalent to the degree that you find your Chiron placement in. So for example, a Chiron at 22 degrees of Aries, perhaps something happened in your 22nd year that triggered your Chiron wound. I have not found that to be true in the charts that I've looked at, but I do want to offer it up in case it's something that is useful to your interpretation of your own personal natal chart. Report back if you find it to be true to your chart, because I would love to gather some information on that. So yeah, the degree of your Chiron placement, the house that you find it in, the sign that you find it in, any aspects it's making to other planets in your chart, all of those things could be noted. But in this video, I just want to talk about the 12 houses, how Chiron wounds might show up based on where you have Chiron in your chart. So, Chiron in the first house. I feel like I need to get closer. Pause. Be right back. This is better. This feels much more intimate. So, Chiron in the first house, and I want to do Chiron in the angular houses 1, 4, 7, 10, before I get into the other houses, because anything that you find located in the angular houses is going to hit different. It's going to hit stronger. It's going to be a different experience. And I feel like one of the strongest experiences of Chiron is finding it in your first house of yourself, your identity, and your appearance and your aesthetic, how you present yourself. And so Chiron in the first house could be, and I would be curious to hear if this is relevant to your experience, the experience of feeling as if yourself is not good enough. A sensitivity towards putting yourself out there, being your authentic self, feeling as if you will be castigated or smacked down if you express who you fundamentally and authentically are. It could also be the experience of not fully understanding and embracing yourself. Like, yes, external judgment or dismissal or harm at the hands of other people, but also even just to yourself, when you're alone with yourself. Feelings of questioning or not understanding who you are just to yourself at your core. Obviously, this kind of can manifest in terms of like self-confidence or self-assertion, self-agency, self-autonomy kinds of issues. And then, as with any planetary placement, I also look at the opposite house to see what's going on. And so I wonder about the experience of putting others before yourself, 7th house issues, you know? And I will also offer up that, yes, those may be the initial wounds and the sensitivities that you just innately carry with you. But then part of the Chiron journey is also, how do you heal yourself? And then through that healing, what are you able to offer the world around you in terms of, once you have healed yourself, you become an expert at healing this particular Chiron wound. So then how are you able to then share that with other people? Like that Virgo exaltation energy. How are we able to practically share? How are we able to practically share the ways in which we have felt wounded with others so that it helps improve their lives? So with a Chiron wound in the first house, I wonder about becoming an expert in telling folks about self-help practices or other practical ways in which you have healed yourself? How do you become a champion for other folks experiencing similar woundings or just underdogs in general? What does it mean to be an expert in expressing your authentic self? And what do you have to share around that journey to get there? That kind of texture with the Chiron in the first house. And then I want to look at Chiron in the fourth house. Again, I want to look at Chiron in the angular houses first, 1, 4, 7, and 10, because those angles just hit harder. And so with Chiron in the fourth house, understanding that your Chiron wound is a fundamental part of who you are. It's a part that might feel a little bit more tender and private than other parts of yourself. And specifically with the Chiron wound in the fourth house, I wonder about early childhood experiences and sensitivities around family, experiences of home. But when I think about family and home, I think about the place of safety and belonging and like one's foundational nature. So what does it mean to feel wounded in that place? Who you fundamentally are, the ways in which you belong to just the smallest unit of society, the family, much less the larger part of society, you know, the world and the community around you. I also wonder about experiences of not feeling nurtured and taken care of by, yes, your family of origin, but even yourself, like self-betrayal, where you're not even taking care of yourself. And then also experiences of safety. Like if the fourth house is like at the bottom of the chart and provides the foundation of the chart, what does it mean to feel wounded at your foundation, at your core? Does that result in a feeling of unsafety in the world? And then the same thing that I said about the first house. Anytime I'm looking at a planetary placement, I also look at the opposite or sister sign to understand what's going on there. And so with the fourth house, being opposite of the 10th house, is this experience about prioritizing work, about prioritizing your public reputation over who you fundamentally are, like in your heart, in your core. And the thing with the Chiron wound is that, yes, you may have experienced this wounding as a young person, carry these sensitivities throughout your life. But then as you heal yourself, you become an expert in healing this particular thing. So with a Chiron wound in the fourth house, what can you share with people in terms of your journey and the wisdom that you have gained through your journey about feeling safe in the world? What do you have to tell people about feeling safe within your own core and, you know, as a foundational experience of your life so that you can put yourself out there in the world? What do you have to share with people about disrupting the feeling of being somehow an underperformer as it relates to capitalism or your public reputation and job? What can you share with people about finding home for and within themselves? And then I want to look at Chiron in the 7th house, just to repeat myself in case folks only check out their particular section. I wanted to look at Chiron on the angular houses first, so houses 1, 4, 7, and 10, because whenever anything hits those particular angles, it has a much stronger effect on any individual's life, because we're talking about the self in the first house, how you relate to others in the 7th house, your core foundational self in the 4th house, and the self that you present to the world in the 10th house. These are really big foundational issues. So yes, to looking at the angles first. But Chiron, specifically in the 7th house, the wound of relating to others. When I think about a Chiron wound in the 7th house, I immediately think of codependency issues. Because the 7th house has to do with our one-on-one connection to others, and this is a place of wounding, I think about, yes, like feeling wounded in your one-on-one connections, and how often I see that show up in my clients' charts as some form of codependency. The same thing that I mentioned with the other houses is, yes, this planetary placement lives in the 7th house, but it is informed by the 1st house. And so when I think about a Chiron wound in the 7th, I very much think about putting the self, 1st house issues, on the back burner in favor of keeping the peace somehow in relationships, or just connecting to other people in a one-on-one kind of way. And so, yes, prioritizing your other folks over yourself, but also this feeling that one must mask who they fundamentally are in order to be and keep connections to partners, or any one-on-one connection, best friends, business partners, that kind of thing. And so the challenge here becomes, how do you find equality in your relationships? And that equality is that each person in the relationship gets to show up as their fullest authentic self and prioritizing themselves even as they are connecting intimately with another person. The other thing about Chiron is that, yes, it's this wounding that you experience as a young person, this sensitivity that you might carry with you for your whole life, but also the experience of healing it. And so with a Chiron in the 7th house, yes, to the experience of healing your wounds of your connections and relationships to other folks, and then becoming an expert at sharing your journey of healing. That journey of healing may have a lot to do with understanding that you are an expert in and have a lot of wisdom around relationships and relating to other people on a one-on-one basis. You may become an expert at understanding the ways that one-on-one connections and relationships profoundly change and transform us, and how to embrace that change if it is change for the better rather than change for the negative. There can also be, with Chiron in the 7th house, this kind of having fixer-upper relationships. You know, this is, when I think about Chiron in the 7th house, this is definitely the kind of person, or can be the kind of person, that is very much like dating and relating in a one-on-one basis to other damaged, wounded people that need fixing and repair. So in that way, you become an expert at empathy and understanding for people going through it, right? And as you heal and become an expert in the ways in which you have healed your 7th house Chiron wound, what if you also become an expert at teaching the ways in which people should not be thrown away, the ways in which no one is disposable? How do we have connections with quote unquote broken people without losing and deprioritizing ourselves? That could be part of your wisdom. And I want to look at Chiron in the 10th house. Again, just in case anybody is only looking at their particular section, I wanted to talk about Chiron first in the angular houses, the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th, because those angles just hit harder. They're just big fundamental pieces of who we are. Ourself in the 1st house, how we relate to others in the 7th house, our safety and our foundational being in the 4th house, and then the self that we present to the world and our public reputation in the 10th house. So these are really big fundamental issues of life. And so with a Chiron wound sitting in the 10th house, I wonder very much about early childhood experiences of feeling harmed and wounded, or sensitivities that you carry throughout life related to how people see you, your public reputation. This could be the experience of feeling as if you shouldn't put yourself out there, shouldn't be seen in public, or that somehow everyone is publicly judging you. It could be the experience of feeling overburdened by spoken or unspoken expectations that the world and society may have of you. As with any planetary placement, I also look at the opposite house to understand a bit more about how this might play out. And I wonder about 10th house Chiron experiences of feeling afraid to put yourself out there, and that you must keep your authentic self private, keep it a secret, keep it hidden from the public eye. And so I wonder about experiences of masking. By masking in this sense is more of the autistic masking experience, because I'm autistic and so I understand things through this lens. I very much understand what it is to put on a public face because you feel as if your actual authentic face is not going to be accepted by people, or it is unsafe to be who you are in the world. That kind of masking, not the code switching kind of masking. Though, code switching does have a bit of that. Like, it's often rooted in safety concerns. But we're not talking about like this cultural shift, but more of a foundational, who I am must be kept secret, because there is some sort of public expectation of me that I must live up to. It could also be this hypersensitivity to or around achievement. Do you meet the goals that you set for yourself? When you do meet those goals, is it ever enough? Do you always feel as if you should be doing more? Also, because 10th is opposite of the 4th and Chiron is so much about childhood wounds, I wonder about the experience of getting to be a child. Is that something that contributed to your wounding? Not being allowed somehow to be a child when you were a child. Having to mask as an adult and present as an adult at a very young age. And then there's also the part about Chiron wounds where, yes, it's a sensitivity, a wounding that you carry with you, but then as you heal it, you become this expert in this particular area of life. And so with a Chiron wound in the 10th house, what is it that you have in terms of a lifetime of experience and wisdom around being authentic in public? What is it that you can tell people about the experience of meeting your goals? Achievement, for lack of a better word. What is it that you can tell people about the unspoken rules and expectations of society that you just sort of innately understand through your Chiron wound? Okay, now let's look at Chiron and the succedent and cadent houses, the non-angular houses. So, Chiron in the 2nd house. This is the kind of placement that inspired this video. So when I think about Chiron in the 2nd house, I immediately think about feeling wounded as it relates to one's material resources and or values, because that's the stuff that the 2nd house deals with. I haven't seen, logically, when I first started studying Chiron and period, when I thought about Chiron in the 2nd, I thought it was maybe the wound of growing up without access to material resources. So, challenging financial conditions. But what I've seen more often is just a difficulty with material resources and money, feeling uncomfortable to experience those things, experience stability, much less abundance in terms of finances and material resources. Just a sense of guilt at taking pleasure in anything to do with material resources. Just a feeling of not being worth it, both in the material resources that bring comfort to your life, but also in a kind of fundamental human sense, like in terms of like your values around your selfhood, not feeling worth it kind of energy. I think it's a really normative desire to want to have financial stability and, you know, be able to take care of your, not only yourself, but like your people, the folks that you love. But there's something about a second house Chiron wound that says, I am not deserving, I am not worthy of that. Sometimes it can just show up as like a kind of underspending, miserly kind of way. Or I've also seen it show up as overspending because the person somehow doesn't feel as if they are worth financial stability, holding on to resources, growing resources over time. Mind you, I'm talking a lot about like the material resources and physical resources like money, housing, stuff like that. But there's also the part of one's talents and one's self-worth as resources as well. There can be wounding around that. Now, the thing with Chiron is that, yes, you have this initial wounding from your childhood and this kind of sensitivity that you just perpetually carry with yourself. But there's also the experience of healing it. And in that process and journey of healing the wound, how do you then become an expert and be a sort of person that is able to share your journey of healing with others? So with a second house Chiron wound, how are you able to then teach what it is like to somehow feel worth it? How are you able to convince others that they are worth it? And by worth it, I mean worth having resources, stability, comfort. Yeah. Are you able to help other folks heal the part of themselves that feels guilty about having stability, comfort, ease in their material conditions? And looking at Chiron in the third house, I very much think about the wound of communication and also intelligence. And I'm putting them hand in hand because there seems to be this pattern that I've observed of folks with Chiron in the third house feeling as if what they have to say is not valuable, and oftentimes it's connected to a feeling of themselves not being intelligent enough, smart enough, witty enough, as adept with the language enough to matter, to be of value. Maybe the experience of not feeling as if you can speak and have your words valued, but also like maybe even just the literal experience of not feeling as if you can speak. And so like, speech issues, dyslexia issues. I've seen this with a couple of clients where their native tongue was their first language, but they were in a society in which they were speaking a different language, and so there's a wounding around that, being able to communicate in the new adapted language. There also might be the experience of, yes, being the last person to speak up, but sometimes even the experience of being too verbose because you're trying to overly explain yourself in order to be understood. And with Chiron, yes, the deal is that you may have felt wounded in this particular area as a young person, and then you carry this sensitivity throughout your life. But then, yes, you get to figure out how to heal from it, right? And in your process of healing yourself and figuring out how to get to some feeling of healing, that you become an expert in how to heal this particular wound and are then moved to share that wisdom of your experience with other folks. And so a third house Chiron, while struggling with these issues around, you know, the way that you think, the way that you communicate, write, speak, that kind of thing. Yes, to those feelings of wounding within, you become this expert at sharing with other people why their voice matters, why they deserve to take up space, why they deserve to share their ideas, and why their ideas are brilliant and worthy and worth it. Be this experience of understanding, like, just how mental processes help us to process the world around us and transform our lives dramatically. That's the stuff that you become like an expert in and are asked to share your wisdom in. And then we come to Chiron in the 5th house. This is my particular Chiron placement. Reminder that, yes, to looking at what house you have Chiron in, but also what sign you have it in. What is the planetary ruler of that sign? Where do you find it in your chart? Are there any aspects being made between Chiron and your other planets? Yeah. 5th house is in charge of things like creativity, self-expression, our dating life, just the things that bring us pleasure, you know, like sexy fun times, like hobbies, like creativity, like children, if children bring you joy, you know, all of those sorts of 5th house things. And so it can be the experience of feeling guilty for enjoying those things, having downtime, having hobbies, having non-traditional hobbies in particular. It can be the feeling of thinking that your creativity and your artistry does not matter. It can be this feeling of not wanting to share your art, your hobbies, your creativity with the world because they feel somehow embarrassing or too weird or unique. It could also be the feeling of fighting against all of that to share your art and then immediately feeling as if you are being a braggart. You're doing too much in terms of sharing something that brought you joy. And so then the thing with Chiron is that, yes, it's this wound that may have happened in your early childhood, this sensitivity that you carry with you throughout life, but it's also the experience of healing those things. And through that journey of healing, you become an expert, you know, and you are encouraged, maybe even supposed to teach others about your journey to healing. So in this way, a 5th house Chiron person can become an expert at sharing with people the importance of having hobbies, the importance of pursuing joy. The reason, I say this all the time, but the reason why I came here is to feel good. And what would it be like if feeling good was a guiding principle? That part, that's where I live as a 5th house Chiron who is trying so hard to heal my Chiron wound. And I feel like I have a lot to say in terms of expertise and earned experiential wisdom around the importance of prioritizing joy. And if you're a 5th house Chiron, I hope that you do too. I will also say, because this is my Chiron placement, that yes to experiencing joy, and also, you know, we got to find balance in this thing. I am horrible, horrible at prioritizing feeling the full range of human emotions, like rage, like sadness, like grief. Those things are important too. So, you know, find the balance. Wah, wah. And then we come to Chiron in the 6th house, the wound of not having your shit together. I'm sure there's a better way to say that, but that's what I think about when I think about Chiron in the 6th house. I think about folks who have the experience of working really hard at health, at wellness, at getting their daily routines together, at showing up, you know, and doing the responsible thing in life, but also in their jobs, you know, really just, you know, having their shit together and being, well, for a lack of a better word, like perfect in every aspect of their lives. Can be really intense insecurities about being somehow disorganized or being perceived as disorganized, or feeling as if they are not healthy enough, you know, trigger warning, eating disorder experiences with Chiron in the 6th house. Saying that that's everyone's experience. I'm saying that I have seen this experience with Chiron in the 6th house. And then because of the ways in which the 6th house, of course, is across from the 12th house, there can be a feeling of deprioritizing the spiritual, unknown, unexplainable parts of life in favor of what is real, what is tangible, what matters. And so with all of the Chiron placements, yes, there's the experience of feeling wounded as a young person around this particular issue, and then also carrying that sensitivity throughout your life. But there's also the experience of healing from it. And in that journey to healing, gathering this experiential wisdom that makes you become an expert in how to heal this particular wound, and how you might feel called to share that expertise with others. So yes, a Chiron in 6th house person might be incredibly adept at helping other people get their shit together. You know, what are the steps what goals do you want to accomplish? What are the steps that you need to achieve your goals? It's giving life coach kind of energy. Oh, that's a beautiful special skill. The way in which 6th house Chiron folks can help people with their own, you know, wellness routines, their own personal goals, the way that they show up in terms of like organization at work and in life. Like these are all special skills that a 6th house Chiron has experientially learned. The experience of how reaching all of these mundane goals can dramatically transform one's life. One caution though, I think sometimes Chiron 6th house folks can get so involved in like helping other folks get their shit together that they can become over involved, and maybe even in a codependent kind of way, trying to like organize someone's life for them. Like you can't care more about organizing someone than they care themselves. That is a caution. And usefulness. Yes, usefulness is a really good feeling. And also, how do we not get caught up in usefulness and understand that we have to attend to our own selves first? Chiron in the 8th house placement, what immediately comes to mind is the wound of sharing. The wound of sharing yourself with others, and the risk that you take in terms of sharing yourself with others in being seen, and how being seen might lead to being controlled. Power dynamic stuff. And the wound of sharing material resources with others, and how that too could lead to a loss of self in terms of feeling controlled by sharing material resources with other folks. With a Chiron in the 8th house too, I think about all of the different ways in which control of your own personal self may have been taken from you or not allowed to have control of your own self. The loss of control is primarily what I think about with a Chiron wound, whether that's through drug and alcohol use, the ways in which other people try to control other folks with material resources, feeling just controlled in romantic relationships, controlled or wounded by other people's intense emotions or sexual dynamics. Yeah, just a lot of those 8th house themes, you know, of course, showing up for Chiron in the 8th house. But as I've been saying with all of these Chiron placements, yes, Chiron, this place where we have felt wounded in our early childhood, and this sensitivity that we carry with us throughout our lives, and also as you heal this particular wound, you become an expert in how to heal this wound because you have that experiential wisdom, and you are called on, or may be called on, to share that wisdom with others. And so as a person with a Chiron and 8th house wound, you become this expert in sharing with others the ways in which being known, being seen can be safe given some sort of energetic boundary, given a willingness to transform yourself. If this is about the loss of like self-control, how do you then transform the self in a healing sort of practice that allows you your own personal authority, autonomy, personal power. Now, also because of the 8th house's association with like the inner workings of the mind, and particularly shadow work, I think of the 8th house as associated with psychology, and the study of, you know, human minds and the ways in which our shadow selves work. And so in this way, I think about 8th house Chiron folks being excellent counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists, yeah, that kind of feeling. Whether you are like a licensed professional or if you just act out that role in your personal interactions with others. I just want to offer up just like a moment of gentleness as well to say, hey, 8th house Chiron folks, I see you. I know that this is an intense place to have Chiron, and that this is the real important work of life in terms of really being able to do that shadow work and understand the shadows that most people refuse to look at. And that is a gift that I hope you don't take for granted. With Chiron in the 9th house, I wonder about the experience of feeling wounded as you search for meaning and God in the world. I think a lot of times what I've seen with Chiron in the 9th house wounds is this feeling of not trusting one's own internal guidance, and not understanding the ways in which you are wise and collecting more wisdom all of the time. Also could be experiences of feeling disconnected somehow from spirit, or not having a sense of meaning about the world. Pause for a second. I think it's really important, no matter what it is that you end up seizing on, whether if it's religion and spirituality or your own ancestry or any other thing, there has to be a why of it all. And that, I think, is the stuff that is important to understand as a Chiron 9th house person. This could also be the experience of feeling wounded by other people's ideas of why and God being forced upon you. So I've seen a number of 9th house Chirons healing from early childhood religious trauma, or somehow feeling that their own personal, spiritual, religious beliefs are somehow not valuable or so off the beaten path that they can't even be shared in the world. It's that wound of just how is it that you expand your mind and expand your consciousness and make sense of like the stuff that doesn't make sense in the world. And so, yes, this experience of feeling wounded in the early childhood experiences around these particular issues, this sensitivity that you might carry with you this, you know, throughout your whole life, and also the experience of healing these wounds, and in that experience of healing, gathering all of this experiential wisdom that makes you an expert. And then how do you share? How do you apply that knowledge? How do you get into that Virgo exaltation of Chiron and gather all of these experiences, all of these data points to synthesize, integrate them into your life, and share with other folks how to integrate them into their lives? How can you share with other folks the wisdom and the importance of being on a search for meaning and finding meaning about why we exist, and the importance of making meaning for why we exist, finding God in themselves or externally, understanding the why of it all, and the ways in which understanding those things really deeply transforms us and our experience on this planet. Also are uniquely qualified to help people that are trying to heal from early religious trauma, or early religious trauma and cult experiences even. And then also because the ninth house is so much associated with teaching shared wisdom and publishing, I wonder about not only feeling called to share your experiential wisdom with folks, but to also maybe even write about it, to distribute and disseminate that healing journey far and wide. And then we come to Chiron in the 10th house. I just want to pause for a second and say, I just had to change my camera battery. And I realized that I have been talking for dang near 2 hours about Chiron. Y'all better blow this video up. I'm not trying to like threaten anybody, but also I'm sorry, y'all. I'm feeling a little loopy because I've been talking for 2 hours. Okay. Where were we at? Oh, not Chiron on the 10th, but Chiron in the 11th house, actually. So Chiron in the 11th house wounds. The wound of other people, the wound of finding your place in society. Yeah, when I think about Chiron sitting in the 11th house, I think about experiences of the group, you know, and what it's like to feel connected or disconnected from your friend groups, or to not feel as if you have a place in society, as if somehow you're not a part of it all. It can also be the experience of feeling abandoned by society, somehow feeling as if you're too weird, too unique, too whatever to fit in. It can also be the experience of group trauma, of really experiencing some horrible things at the hands of people or groups that you thought were friends or somehow meant to keep you safe or somehow aligned with you. Just this feeling of like rejection comes up over and over again. It can also be the experience of having friends or groups that you belong to that are incredibly unique, counterculture kinds of experiences, alt kinds of experiences. This could definitely be the experience of, yes, understanding the transformative nature of like belonging to a group and understanding your place in society and finding friends that like match your freak, basically. And understanding how important those connections are just as a human in the world, and understanding how they deeply transform us in a way that other folks may not be able to understand. This is definitely like the wound of community, but also understanding the importance of community and finding and building your own unique community. So yes, this feeling of, belonging, related wounds in your childhood, maybe even a sensitivity that you just carry with you throughout your life about your fit or belonging. But then you heal, or you begin a healing journey anyway, because I don't know that healing ever is entirely accomplished. But yeah, you become a person dedicated to healing this particular area of your life. And through that experience of having this healing journey, you become an expert. You gather all of this experiential wisdom, and then you're able to share that with other folks. Not even able to, but called to share that healing journey with other folks to help them in their own healing journey as it relates to these Chiron 11th house issues. The wisdom of understanding the importance of friend groups that really get you. The wisdom of understanding how healing it is to find one's place in society, or one's place in the group, or one's place in a group of folks who are beloved community. Definitely the person that is going to be the most welcoming person at the social gathering, because they know what it feels like to feel ostracized, rejected, somehow not a part of it all. Which, by the way, can I just say, you may feel as if you're not doing enough to make those connections, to make people feel welcome based on, your Chiron wounds and in the past. But you are. Honestly, if you're doing anything to build community and make connections, you're doing more than what the average person under capitalism is doing. So please be easy on yourself. Then finally, we come to Chiron in the 12th house. It's giving rich inner world. When I think about a Chiron wound sitting in the 12th house, I very much think about all of the ways in which self-betrayal can lead to experiences of feeling undone. So first and foremost, I love 12th house placements, period. I just love, I think maybe it's the Pisces in me, but there's just something so incredibly powerful about the 12th house. Everybody seems so focused on like the transformative nature of the 8th house, and I feel it, but also the 12th house and understanding who you are when ain't nobody else around, understanding who you are in the darkness, taking the space to understand yourself exclusive of everything in this world. Oh, that's the juicy bits of the 12th house that I love. Also the dream realm, dreamosphere, you know what I mean. But then with a Chiron wound in the 12th house, I wonder if we are talking about the experience of feeling wounded by experiences of isolation, feeling wounded about or around experiences of being in the void, for lack of a better word. What I'm thinking about is how, if all of the houses build on each other, 3 builds on 2, 2 builds on 1, that kind of thing, then the opposite can be true. And the 12th house is about the dissolution of the first house, if that makes any sense. Experiences of not even being consciously aware of your Chiron wound, repressing it, or maybe it just feels hidden from you. They say even the 12th house is about past life experiences, and so I wonder if this is even about, or can be about, Chiron wounds that have transferred over from past life experiences that don't feel like a conscious experience, but rather something that you're subconsciously carrying from the before times. I don't want to get too woo about it, but that's what they be saying. It can be the wound of feeling lonely and isolated. It can also be the experience of somehow feeling disconnected from spirit or spirituality as well. Or maybe even the wound of like intentionally checking out via like forms of escapism. I'm thinking about it because the 12th house is so much associated with the dream realm and the unconscious realm. And so what is it like to intentionally put yourself in the dream realm, intentionally try to put yourself in the unconscious realm? And yes, substance abuse issues come to mind, but also there's also the idea of like sleeping the day away. Yeah, those kinds of things as well. Also, a reminder about, looking at the opposite house from the 12th house, the 6th house, and what can be said about your self-care practices and how that is contributing to or taking away from your experience of feeling wounded and your healing journey. And so then there's that part about Chiron too. Yes, you may have felt wounded in your early childhood around this particular issue, but then you start trying to heal from it. And on this healing journey, you gather all of this experiential wisdom that makes you an expert in how to heal this 12th house Chiron wound. And then the call is, how do you then share that healing journey with others, and share your expertise with others and allow them the benefit of your wisdom? So with a Chiron in a 12th house, you may become an expert on what it means to take and value alone time for yourself. What it means to balance the need for alone time so that you don't start experiencing isolation, and also maybe even helping people who are experiencing isolation to understand where that line is, where that boundary is between isolation and necessary taking of alone time. So might have expertise and wisdom in terms of the difference between taking necessary alone time and being afraid of being seen and perceived. Be even helping people understand that taking necessary alone time is not the same as being somehow confined, isolated, restricted away from society, and that everybody needs a moment at least of downtime to understand themselves and can reconnect with themselves. It's just that line between understanding like whether you're like pulling away to restore yourself, or are you escaping, and understand and helping people understand the difference, the value in alone time without necessarily feeling as if you must escape from, hide from the world. And I'll also say that like most 12th house placements, Chiron in the 12th house is uniquely qualified to understand people's subconscious motivations and the secrets that they are keeping even from themselves. So yeah, shout out to Chiron 12th house placements, but also all 12th house placements. I adore you. And I see you even when you don't want to be seen. So that is Chiron in all of the 12 houses. At this point, I've been talking for about 2.5 hours, and I am talked out, y'all. So I will close by saying, if you like this video, please make sure you subscribe. If you like this video, please make sure that you comment, that you like it by clicking the little like button. Maybe you even share it with a friend, because that's the kind of support that I need and desire to continue to do this work, Also, if you have interest in supporting my work in other ways, consider becoming a member of this channel. Membership in this channel starts at $3.99 a month. You get really cool perks like custom emojis and loyalty badges. You get to see content before it's published to the public. And you get to support your favorite Black queer autistic astrologer. And if a monthly commitment feels outside your capacity, please consider doing, a one-time gift via that tip button. I think it's called the thanks button below. And if neither one of those options feel great, please know that just being here, watching my videos all the way through, liking, commenting, telling your friends about them is equally important and valuable to me. So yeah, that's it. That's the video. I wish I had more brain power to create a witty outro for you, but I don't, because I am tapped. I probably won't talk to anyone for the next 2 days. This has been a lot. Anyway, thanks for making time for queer astrology. Bye.